Hey everybody, welcome to the Canadian Job Search Podcast. My name is John Ribeiro and I will be your host. I'll be interviewing recruiters, hiring managers, and experts to help you land your next job sooner. Just a quick reminder to download your high-converting resume template that's been proven to get you more job interviews at resumetemplate.canadianjobsearchacademy.com. And if this episode resonates with you, then remember to subscribe, comment, and share. Thank you and welcome to the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Canadian Job Search Podcast. My name is John Ribeiro, your host, and today I've got a very special guest in Kristoff Carter. He is an author, speaker, and executive coach. He is the founder of Epic Life, a website devoted to conscious leadership that has a daily meditation practice for thousands. Chris, that is totally amazing. I love it. And he's also got a new book called Permission to Glow, a spiritual guide to epic leadership, and which releases this month, October 2021. Well, Chris, welcome to the show.
It's so great to be with you, John. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I know. Yes, me too. Just as we were preparing for this particular call, you and I think we had a really good flow of conversation. I know it's going to carry through into what we're going to be talking about today on the podcast, which is really around leadership in terms of what's happening today out there in the environment. And so let's get right into it. So Chris, what is different today? What is different in today's work market? What is different about leadership today? I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Well, it's really the central theme of the book of conscious leadership. I think that conscious leadership is what's being asked of us, by our crazy volatile world that we're in, or some, benevolent source that's trying to get us to just be kinder to one another. And we see this disruption happening everywhere, manifesting in every form. So if it's not the disruption of supply chains, which is very real at the moment, it's the disruption in how we work. It's, moving out of offices into the home office. It's climate change, certainly, the lack of political discourse. There's just all these forces all around. The military calls it VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think we all experience that on some level. And the leaders that I work with that are taking that invitation to look at themselves and saying, oh, I can show up differently in this. It's required that I'm to show up differently in this. They seem to be rising to a new standard and kind of charting a new course. So I think it's simultaneously both the most exciting time to be alive in history and also at times the most terrifying and frustrating.
So let's touch on that. So exciting. Let's talk about it. I know you and we talked a little bit about this, but what's exciting about what's happening today?
I think that we are moving out of the era of human resources. And by that, I mean, if we just minimize these people that work for us or around us as resources, that's a very Western culture thing to do. And a spiritual teacher once told me that, when a Native American or an indigenous person walks into a forest and looks at trees, they don't see resources, they see their family, And so the fact that we're moving beyond that, I think is really exciting. We're seeing the rise of, finally overdue, more women in leadership, stepping up and, taking on some really formidable threats and challenges. To me, that's exciting, as a father of daughters and as an espoused feminist and trying to, encourage more female leadership to step up. I think that's an exciting sign of things to come, and also this, all the innovation happening around how we connect, coming out of this pandemic, or if we're even moving out of the pandemic. That's kind of touch and go depending on the day. But I think it's reinventing how we connect, how we interface, these Zoom calls. I've been on them for years because I always worked remote, but to see this, pervasive force pulling us into these, digital rooms, I think it's allowing us to be everywhere at once while being distributed. And to me, that is truly exciting. I know it can be crazy making for some people, and there's a lot of etiquette training to be administered or whatever. But I also think that is exciting. And so those are just a couple examples.
Yeah, and I'm with you 100%. I think it's given us. And I think about the workplace and people that I know that have worked in different fields, people who've worked in the financial field or people who've worked in the legal field, being able to even work remote was something that wasn't even possible pre-pandemic, right? Like there was a mindset that said, hey, we can't do this, it's impossible. And now that we're here and that we're living this new world, this reality, actually you said you've been living it for 15 years working remote. But for the rest of the world, I think it's really put us on a fast track in terms of what's going to happen, and not what's going to happen. I think what's happening right now is the future. So what I'd love to get is just your insights in terms of what happened. What do you think is going to happen to those organizations that that refuse to change and refuse to shift into this new reality?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can jokingly say, and it's kind of snarky to say, well, good luck with that, you know.
Yeah.
But the fact is that, you know, I came from digital media, which is a very forward-looking industry, very technologically savvy thing. And I remember our leader being pretty adamant about not having summer Fridays. Like, if we were paying for all these offices, we needed to be in the office, utilizing the office, you know, that in-person collaboration, which I do think is important. I think we have to find ways forward to have that. We can't replace that. And, you know, in this pandemic, there are so many companies I work with that are unquestionably having the most successful years that they've had in recent memory. I don't know if it's because more of us are at home consuming more things or whatever, but there's a lot of success to be had while their whole workforce is distributed. So they're navigating this kind of on both sides, like, wow, we're being successful. And then, you know, in coaching, what I'm looking at in leaders is how often do we relate to our success as a problem? You know, oh man, I'm getting my ass kicked. I don't have enough, you know, team to meet the demand. And that's a very real problem. I'm not trying to minimize it. However, we have to look at all these things showing up at once and seeing the opportunity. And I think the leaders that I'm really impressed with are the ones that are taking a step back, slowing down a bit wherever they can, and realizing, okay, there is an opportunity here to kind of rejigger, to rethink, to reimagine. And as they're doing that, they're kind of surrendering into the new. There's no going back to normal. I think we're proving that out every single day. There's only forward to better. And the ones who are reimagining that path there, some interesting things are happening. And, you know, I'm not saying that it's not a challenging time. It's certainly crazy making for many of my organizational leaders. And they are realizing, like, oh, I'm connecting with the people that matter most on a deeper level. I'm right sizing my work inside the rest of my life and living and working more in line with my values. I think those things are incredibly important, and they frankly needed to happen for a long time.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You know, your style of leadership is something, you know, as a former leader myself, it's one of the things I believed in, right? Really taking the time to look after your team, but looking after them in the right way and giving them what they need. So, you know, I'm so glad that you're bringing this up today, because I think this is where a lot of leaders today are struggling, right? And I've had the opportunity to speak with several people on this topic. And the one thing that keeps coming back from the candidates that are currently in the process of looking for work, one of the things they're looking for is a leader that's understanding, a leader that can appreciate them, a leader that really recognizes the work that they're doing for the organization. So from a candidate's perspective, sorry, go ahead, Kristoffer.
Oh, no, I was just, gosh, it's so spot on, you know, and I think about, there's a definite generational gap in that too. You know, I consider myself a Gen Xer, which is, you know, the only rule of Gen X is to never identify as such. We want to be invisible and not be known as such. But some of my clients on the older side, they're kind of the young boomer generation, and they really identify with that. You know, in that generation, there's a lot more of that. What I do is who I am. So if I lose a job, I lose my identity, and I don't want to take anything away from that. That is painful, and it's their reality, and it's harsh. However, the opportunity that you're pointing to is that these younger generations demand to be seen, demand to be heard, demand to be, you know, experienced as full three-dimensional human beings. And sometimes as a Gen Xer, I even found, like, my kids are Gen Z, I guess. I don't know. There's like a new generation every week. But the Gen Z thing is, you know, see me, hear me, I'm going to be outraged, you know, and I'm trying to relate and understand that. I'm like, wow, this is so inconvenient. You know, there's so many different designations of human beings now. Like, how do I keep them all straight? Like, as a Gen Xer, that I could file that as being, you know, inconvenient, but it's unquestionably the way the world is moving. And I'm really impressed with the more seasoned older leaders who are willing to take that journey, to listen to their younger colleagues and say, oh yeah, what do I have to learn here? And what is there to learn here? What is there to discover? Approaching this career journey through a lens of curiosity. And the ones who do that, I'm just really inspired by.
Yeah, no, 100. And I appreciate and I respect those leaders that have made that shift, because one of the things that I've recognized in the younger people that are going into the workforce. Listen, I've got I've got 3 stepkids, and they're young teens. They're 19 and 21. And they're going into the workforce today. And the one thing they keep telling me is they want to work in a place where they're respected, in a place where they're appreciated, but also in a place where people will listen to their ideas, right? And I think a lot of these older leaders, or the leaders that are resistant to this new way of working, they're going to struggle. And they're going to struggle in a way that maybe wasn't as visible as it is today, as it was 20 months ago. It wouldn't have been a challenge because people just, not a problem, we're just going to go get another resource, another human resource. But today they're just, this is why we're entering this thing called the Great Resignation right now, is because people are leaving organizations because they are incredibly unsatisfied with the leadership that they have. I've got a firm belief where you don't leave an organization, you leave a leader. Sure. And if leaders aren't aware to that, this is where they need to become more aware in terms of what they're doing and how they react and treat people. And I know one of the things that you talk about is just spirituality in general, spirituality from a leader's perspective. So what I'd love to get is just some of your insight. What does a spiritual leader look like in a corporate type of environment?
Sure. And I'll tie it directly to something you just pointed to, which is more is being asked of leaders than ever before. On paper, it's a hard job. There's a lot to be responsible, and it's a thin line between a great responsibility and a great burden. To be a leader. There's a lot of thankless aspects to it. It's not just about the prestige and the job title and the dollar bills. All those are great benefits, don't get me wrong. But it's about serving the universal good of your client base, of your customer base. And, to me, that starts to get into a spiritual mission. We don't have to identify as spiritual as such to be in this conversation, by the way. Like, whatever that benevolent force is, that God, divine, feminine, whatever the universe, whatever you want to call that unifying force, it doesn't care what we call it. It's just there for some of us if you're a person of faith, and it might not be there for others if you're an atheist. But in the coaching of leaders that I work on in conscious leadership, my leaders are always looking to expand their capacity on some level, meaning they have to work on their interior to hold more random chaos coming at them, hold more opportunity so their abundance doesn't become another problem of abundance, hold more room for people and all of their various needs. I mean, more is being asked of us. And to me, that means that leadership can start to look like a spiritual conversation, because there's proven practices that have been around for thousands of years, meditation, yoga, reflection, contemplation, that create space for these things. And if there's one thing I think the world could be asking of us, is to slow down, and it'll feel counterintuitive, because we could think that, slowing down equals death. But that's not the right answer. I call that being speedy rabbit. And when my clients show up all jittery on their coaching calls and they have that shark energy, the first thing we start doing is cycling down so we could actually even have a real conversation.
That must be incredibly interesting. I can only imagine. And, and the thought that keeps crossing my head is you got to slow down to speed up. Right. And this is where we're at today, right? You have to slow down in order to speed up, to get clarity in terms of where to move and in terms of what direction to take the ship, right? Because I think what I've seen, just based in my career is, we're all rushing, we're all steaming forward, we're forging ahead, but we're not necessarily knowing where we're going. We just know we got to push forward, right? And I think,
go ahead. In your line of work, all the time, but how many people they practice it? We are slow to hire and quick to fire. It's like, well, are you? Because in this moment, you're being spooked into like, any warm body will do, and we lost a lot of good men out there, and we're just going to bring a bunch of people in, and, and then, they'll stick around if we don't have the courage to have the feedback conversation and coach them out of the organization. That's kind of more often than not how it works.
Yeah.
But the willingness to slow down allows us to be more thoughtful with how we interview, how we, determine what's going to make somebody successful here, and slowing down in conversation. So we're not managing the person, but we're coaching the person, we're leading the person. That requires, slowing down, thoughtful conversation. But the good news is it doesn't need to require more time. Like, I think that's the misnomer. I think we can create light touch, high leverage conversations with our people. And my best leaders do exactly that. And they're in more of a coaching relationship with their key players, and not I need you to do this. And that's, kind of left over from the industrial age, and it's just not working anymore.
Yeah. No, the one line that keeps crossing my mind, the opposite of what you said is we're quick to hire and slow to fire, right? Because we're we're not open and transparent with the people that we're working with. And this is what I'm noticing as well. This great resignation, people are leaving organizations, but people also don't even make it to the organization because their onboarding practice is taking so long. So people are getting hired and they're not showing up. Like, just imagine, right? Like, I think about early in my career, having a job and not showing up because it didn't feel like it was the right thing for me. Oh my gosh.
Right. Our father would show up on our doorstep and strangle the life out of us. There was not an option.
It was not an option. But, it is different. It is completely different today in terms of what's happening out there in the environment and just with people's expectations, right? So meditation is one of the ways to do that. And, I've been preaching this for years, like meditation, take 10 minutes, slow down, and don't think about anything, or just, take a guided meditation route. What I found is organizations that have ways of doing meditation, so incorporating it into some of their practice. I know there's a big Canadian financial institution. What they do at the beginning of every meeting that they host is they do a 5-minute meditation before they get started, which is great. Some of the people think it's a little bit hokey and,
of course,
just because they're not used to it, but it's definitely one of the ways I believe organizations need to make that shift. And in order to get the clarity for the future, that's what they need to keep doing. So, I love what you're saying. I think it's incredibly important that, people pay attention to this, especially the leaders out there or the candidates that are looking for the right leader to work for. This is what you need to look for in a leader. So what would be some of those characteristics? So as a candidate, I got a big audience that are candidates looking for work today. What should they be looking for in a leader when they're connecting with leaders or looking for opportunities inside of organizations?
Yeah, thanks for asking this question, because I think we can realize that we are just as much interviewing the prospective employer at this point as they are interviewing us. So we don't need to show up trying to just prove ourselves worthy of getting a job. We need to know that they are somebody we can partner with for this segment of our career, And in conscious leadership, one of the concepts I love is just this concept of embodiment. Meaning, do you sense a congruence between their spoken word and how they show up, like what they're bringing into the space? And I know this might seem ethereal or woo-woo or weird, but you get a vibe when you say, how, if you ask somebody, hey, how are you doing? And they say, fine. It's like, we don't sound fine at all. Like, how some part of us is like, can I trust you if you're, BSing yourself or BSing me? But I would tune into their embodiment. Do they have joy? Do they have any ease in their, kind of cadence that they're carrying themselves with? Are they just congruent with how they're showing up? I think that's a first step. And then I would also ask how they think about things like emotional intelligence, because there's a whole, it's great for people like me that I'm seeing a turning of the tides. Like, so many things that were filed as soft skills just a couple years ago, just, meditation, or, self-compassion, or, all these, even coaching on some level, these things are becoming, kind of the brave frontier of work, and trailblazers like Brene Brown, who's created all the research and books to back it up, that vulnerability is huge. I think a conscious leader or a great leader would be willing to be vulnerable in an interview. So when you ask a hard question, you could sense if they're answering it from an authentic place or if they're just giving you the corporate talking points. And if it's the corporate talking points, to me, that's a red flag.
Yeah, no, 100%. And one of the things I coach my candidates on is going in, being authentic, being genuine, being sincere. And if the person on the other side of the table is not doing the same, then maybe that's not the person you want to work for. So definitely something to be careful of. And I love that you brought up, actually, as you were speaking, I was thinking of Brene Brown and vulnerability and
Sure.
what that means in today's workplace. It's a must, but I think it's a must in a way in an environment where it's respected, right? Because not every environment's going to respect the vulnerability, and they might see it as weakness, but maybe that's not the
Yeah,
right
and
environment for you. Go ahead.
in my book, there's four permissions, and the second one is it's called permission to feel all the feels. And what it basically means is to work and live from a place of emotional intelligence, because when we're
Mm,
willing to be honest with ourselves, we allow others to be honest with us and be honest with themselves. It gives them permission. We give ourselves that permission. It kind of emanates out. And I really think that level of connection is what we crave with people, but it's also scary for us, and we try to protect ourselves from it. So we say, like, oh, that's too weird. And I'm not saying, like, just spill all the dirt about everything that's going on with you emotionally at every second of the day. Like, there's an appropriate way to do this and an inappropriate way to do this. However, being real with people, which I think is the center of Brene Brown's work,
mm,
is in service of creating that emotional intelligence, because the goal here is to feel seen and heard, to create that environment where people feel seen and heard. And in doing so, that's what keeps people around. We just want to be connected. We just want to know that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And,
mm.
kind of the tragic paradox of human beings is that we will do anything we can to protect ourselves from that. Like, oh, I got to put on this game face to go get this corporate job. And it's like, well, the reason why you're looking for another job in 3 to 6 months is because you kind of game faced your way through the interview 6 months prior, versus being real with what you're looking for, asking the interviewer to do the same. I think it sets you up to find something you might want to stick with for a while.
Yeah. And so this is great. So you talked about one of your permissions. I know there's four of them in total. So what are the
Mm-hmm.
four permissions, and how were each discovered?
Uh, First one we've been talking about, permission to chill, which is
From
totally radical in Western culture. It solves for that speedy rabbit that I talked about. If you're willing to slow down and just pause and reflect and be with what is,
mhm.
that's creating a meditation practice. That's permission to chill. And I gave these kind of joking names to just allow leaders to know that it's going to be okay. Nobody's going to die here if you just slow down. Um, and the second one, as I mentioned, permission to feel all the feels.
Mhm.
That's the path of emotional intelligence. And the third one is why most people hire a coach, and what I think most of us are after in our job search, which is what I call permission to glow in the dark. And
Mhm.
permission to glow in the dark is to find your vocation, to find your full self-expression, to not just pull down another paycheck, but to make a dent in the universe, to self-actualize on a high-performing team. I think most of us are after that on some level. And yes, we have to conquer and work with our fear at all times. And that's what the darkness points to. So that's permission to glow in the dark. And the fourth one might seem utopian, might seem Shangri-La at this stage, but I do have great evidence of organizations doing this. And that's to give ourselves permission to glow in the light. And permission to glow in the
Mhm.
light, this is about transcending competition for collaboration. If there is some benevolent force in the universe, I think it would want us and need us to heal and uplift the planet and the people around us. And that's the work of the leaders who have done those earlier permissions, who are less concerned with proving themselves at this point, and who are fully concerned with unleashing the power and potential of other people. So it's encouraging when I see that, and I truly think that this kind of weird times we're living in is just a direct ask to give ourselves that permission.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. And I think, and actually, I was going to ask you that question. So, what does glow in the light mean to you, and how's it different from glow in the dark? I think you kind of touched on that.
Mhm.
Um, but it's incredibly important that we shine, we shine and we give back, right? Like, I think a lot of
Yes.
times, and even as leaders, we kind of we dim our lights to not shine too bright because we don't want to be known as the boastful leader or the pompous arrogant, because we've seen some of those leaders, they shine so bright that they kind of blind everybody.
Yeah.
um we definitely want to be careful with that. And I think, going back and just kind of covering some of the things that you mentioned, like bringing that spiritual aspect to it where you're genuine and sincere. And, I think leaders today they need to just be honest with themselves, right? Like I kind of feel, and from what I've seen in the past, is they're not even genuine people. Like you almost create like you said, a different persona. When you're at work, you're one person, and when you're at home, and I used to have this belief years ago where I know it was the wrong belief, but at work I need to be a certain type of person, and then outside of work I can be myself. Like,
yeah, I mean, and I don't want to fault them for that either, because they grew
Mhm.
up like in an environment and in a generation where that was rewarded, and they need to put on the warrior face and go do the thing. And that's, and it still gets the job done. Let's be honest. It can be very effective business wise, but when you're talking about retaining people, not so much. And
Mm.
I think about the great biographies of business leaders that I grew up on in America, at least, which is like Lee Iacocca, who turned Chrysler around. It's a great biography. It's riveting. All of
Mhm.
Jack Welch's chest beating, bravado, all this stuff. But that time of, hardcore masculinity is kind of passing. And now people, and it's not just women, it's men, it's everybody needing to be seen and heard. I think it's just developing. It's creating a demand for just like a softening, more open leader, and I think that's powerful. It's brave
Yeah.
work. I highlight one of my mentors in the book, former president of Sony Pictures here in America. So this guy's like generated something like $40 billion in movie revenue. He's a beast, but he's meditated twice a day for 45 years. Never told that to anybody. Maybe like a couple months ago, he's like, oh yeah, I've been practicing transcendental meditation twice a day for 45 years. I'm like, you left that part out, David. Like that's a total game changer, because he led through times of crisis. He unprecedented growth. He's always had an easy, steady hand, super high emotional intelligence, won all these awards for culture, and is, in his spare time, of leading the fight to end hunger in Los Angeles. So I mean,
Mm.
it is possible. We do have these blueprints walking among us that we can borrow from.
Yeah. So here's it, and just kind of speaking to this, and this is the one thing that's popped into my mind, and I hear it from people all the time. I don't have time to do meditation, right? Like you just
Yeah,
proved an executive at Sony Pictures,
right.
did it twice a day, right? So what do you say to those people? I don't have time in my day to take time to be with
Yes.
myself and to literally
Yeah,
get in tune with who I am.
I
What
love
would you
it.
say to those people?
Well, I'd say for starters, if you don't have 15 minutes, there's probably bigger problems in your life and you might be beyond hope. But what we do in coaching, and I joke with them,
Yeah.
I'll say you're filing this as additive, meaning you have to find another 15 minutes. But what you're not accounting for, and yogis have proved this for thousands of years, that action is not created equal. There's right action, which is highly efficient, surgical precision, highly leveraged action that
Mhm.
requires contemplation and meditation, versus action for action's sake, which is where most of us live. So
Mhm.
I would say, are you willing to reinvest some of your lost action, lost time, and file meditation time as subtractive? Like, what kind of time will I get back if I'm just properly meditating? I jokingly call it like taking your meds. If you take your meds for 15 minutes a day, you'll get so much more back. You'll make better choices at the supermarket. You'll tolerate less drama in your personal life, and it is clinically, it's like shown to be more restorative than sleep. So for years and years, I had to trade 1 hour of sleep every day for 1 hour of meditation every morning,
Mhm.
and that was the best investment I ever made in my career. Like, it transformed everything.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. I definitely, over the last few years, it's something that I've been incorporating into my daily practice. I also meditate. It's one of the things I preach to people to do. But it's definitely, it gives you more clarity in terms of what to do, right? Like we're busy all the time, but we're not busy doing. We're busy for busy sake, not busy because we're being productive or we're contributing or giving back in some way. So
Well, I mean, I
the
could
medit,
tell. I mean, I could
yeah.
tell the second you got on the phone with me, John, that you're a meditator, just because you are in the conversation of that can be an emotional, difficult conversation for people, finding the right job in this crazy time. I mean, it could spook us into going speedy rabbit in a lot of ways, but I could tell like how thoughtful and reflective and how comfortable you are in the ongoing conversation. That is, to me, that's a sign of somebody like that's willing to just slow down each day and just pause and reflect on it.
Thank you. I don't even know what to say. I feel like I'm blushing right now, but thank you, Kristoffer. It's yes, and I'm going to pay attention to that as well. I'm going to listen out for that. And actually for the candidates that are out there, listen for that, right? Listen for the leaders that you're meeting with. If you're doing interviews with people, yesterday I just did a workshop on informational sessions, and just listen for that, right? Listen for people in terms of what they're saying, to kind of get an idea. And actually, this is an incredibly important part of the job search process as well, is you want to make sure that there is a good connection and that you can actually connect on a human level with the person that you're going to be working with. So this has been great. So Kristoffer, thank you for all this amazing information. If people wanted to get a hold of you or learn a little bit more about you, or to learn about the book and where they could get the book, where could they go?
Oh, thanks for asking. No, it has been great. I've really enjoyed the conversation. The book can be found at permissiontoglowbook.com. That's all things book related. We're really excited about that. Okay. And anything related to my executive coaching, training for conscious leaders, workshops, that's all at thisepiclife.com.
Okay. Yeah. So I will make sure that I include those links in the show notes so you guys can get quick access to it. Kristoffer, I just wanted to say thank you again for taking the time to speak with us today, just to share some of these insights. I know today is different, and you bringing this to light and encompassing it in a book is a great way to give ourselves a manual for those leaders that are looking to make that change and that shift and aren't quite sure how. I'm glad that they've got this resource in your book to be able to help them out with that.
Oh, no, I appreciate you seeing that, and I can't wait to run into you on the hot coals at a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within event. We were talking about just before we started recording. We will run into each other, stomping on the coals. I can feel it. Yeah.
Excellent. No, and you know what? I know you're not. So we're located in Canada. I know you're located stateside, but yeah, no, I'm sure our paths will cross for sure. Excellent. I'm looking forward to that. With that, I'm going to wish everybody a great one. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Canadian Job Search Podcast. Wishing you all a great one. Talk to you all soon. Take care.